So I wanted to basically ask you, how do pilots, what are their perspectives on emergencies? Because they can happen.
Because if you go to a flight thinking that you know everything, then maybe you should stop flying, because probably you're becoming a bit dangerous. When you start as a pilot, and everyone can relate to this, you want to show the other guy that you can do things really fast. You want to show them that you know things, that you are fresh, you know the books by heart. You say, this guy is very slow. But as you gain experience, you become like that guy. When you things start going fast, it's time to slow them down. In aviation, things have to be slow. There is time pressure, there is on-time performance pressure, which is normal. You have to take passengers from one point to another. But there is nothing that supersedes safety.
What are some of the things you can be doing to boost your profile, your CV, and enhance your chances of getting that first job?
Some people, unfortunately, they apply with their licenses not valid, because they think that they have the license. As soon as they get the call, then they will go renew their license. The conditions that might make you lose your medical license. Hello everyone, welcome to this new video. I have Abdullah here. He texted me like a couple of days ago. He was asking me all the relevant questions. So it's the first time I do this actually, to post it on my Instagram and YouTube. He'll be asking the questions, and eventually I'll ask some questions to make the conversation beneficial for everyone and maximize the benefit, that you guys can answer all the questions that you have a big question mark on. Hi Abdullah, how are you?
I am. Thank you for having me, first of all. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good man. So you wanted us to do some introduction. You want to start? You want me to start?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
All right, so as everyone knows me here, my name is Yassine. I'm an airline pilot. I've been flying professionally for 8 years. I started on the Airbus A320. I fly the A380 currently, and also in between I flew the Hawker 800. How about you?
My name is Abdullah Ansari, and I'm currently working in a medical business that working in procurement. So it's a field of business which is concerned with purchasing of supplies, services, finding the right suppliers, putting contracts in place. So I'm currently doing this here in the UK. So I reside in the UK. And aviation is something that always fascinated me. It's something that I'm very interested into, and I particularly watch lots of videos on this. And potentially one day I'd like to take my career in that direction as well. So this is what has intrigued and interest into the aviation industry, and hence I thought it would be beneficial if we could have a conversation where I could ask you questions regarding this career and go from there, really. So that's
awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, the questions you sent me were really nice. I liked them. People, they ask me most of the time similar questions, but yours were like very specific, and that's what I liked about your questions. But so you reside in the UK. How long have you been working in the medical field?
So I've been working in just over 2 years in this commercial role within the medical industry. Yeah, so just over 2 years.
All right, and so is that, if you haven't said it already by message, I might have forgotten. When did you, or what triggered your passion for aviation? Like, when did you want to switch careers and pursue something different?
So potentially, whenever I go on a holiday, whenever I sit in an aircraft, it absolutely fascinates me. Yeah. It's a work of art. It's a miracle. The way an aircraft moves and takes off and cruises at very high altitude and then lands, and how we're able to connect to the different parts of the world through an aircraft. It's truly a miracle, and I am always fascinated every time I sit in an aircraft. So it's always something that I've really been fascinated by, and also pilots as well, as they are in control of this aircraft and the way they handle it. So it's something that's always intrigued and interested me, to be honest. And as such, I love aviation videos as well. So particularly focusing on like incidents and accidents that have happened in the past and why they've happened. So I watch lots of pilot videos as well, and I found that this has increased my knowledge of aircraft as well, and how aircrafts work and operate. So it's something I've always been fascinated by, really.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's very impressive for even the pilots that fly every day to experience the takeoff and the landing and all those phases of the flight. They're very impressive. It's doable. I've done it. You can do it. There is no secret behind it or anything. It's just like some hard work and discipline. Yeah. So let's start with the questions. Let's put them like step by step and just list them, or just through the first one, and I will give you the answer. Just give me the easy ones though.
Sure. Let's kick off. So the first question I was going to ask was, as you know, I think we've touched upon this as well. Aviation is a rapidly changing industry. So sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And we've seen this particularly in light of COVID-19, where the aviation industry was in a very bad state. It was completely on its knees, and lots of pilots lost their jobs, lots of airline staff lost their jobs as well. So it's a very volatile industry, rapidly changing, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. So where we are at the moment, 2024, what would your advice be to someone wanting to pursue a career as an airline pilot? Would you say a good time to commence pilot training? Is this a good time to start for somebody wanting to become a pilot?
The honest answer is it depends on the market. Now the market is doing well. The projections that are showing for the next years are very optimistic. But again, COVID happened, crisis happened in the past. They could happen again in the future. But if you're passionate about something and you know that that's the thing you want to pursue, then no matter what are the circumstances that could put you and blow you off, you know that you're going to come back on track and continue the thing you want to do in the first place. So for me, that question, for example, when I wanted to become a pilot, those questions personally is very subjective, were irrelevant because I wouldn't let any circumstances deviate me from my goal or my target. But again, other people will have different circumstances. People have families, have mortgages, and they can't just switch careers overnight and leave everything behind. So that's, again, very, very subjective. But speaking of the market now, how it is doing, it's very optimistic. And I would say it's a very right time to become a pilot. But again, you have to go with a mindset that everything can happen. And that's exactly what a pilot needs. Always go with a mindset that something can happen. Not only when you're preparing for how to become a pilot, but you will see also during your training, when you finish your training and once you become a pilot, you're always looking for threats or what can happen. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I know that most people that ask me this question, they want a different answer. Now it's the right time, you have to do it. But no one can take the responsibility of telling someone do it now,
And that's why I asked that question, because before pilots were sort of suggesting and recommending young people to become pilots until COVID-19 happened, where they were struggling to get jobs, and a lot of pilots as well, established pilots, lost their jobs. So that's why now the advice is slightly changed for young people. I heard one pilot in particular say that if you want to become an airline pilot, make sure you go and get something else. Make sure you go and get a degree first and have your backup career sorted first before you pursue your dream of becoming a pilot. So pilots give different advice these days for young people wanting to become pilots after COVID. So it's slightly changed people's perspectives. Hence, I'm very cautious. Yeah, that's answered the question. That's answered the first one. So if I go on to the second one, what were some of the reasons why you wanted to become a pilot? What were some of the reasons for you choosing to become an airline pilot?
All right, I'll come back to that. But first, I want to add something to what you said, which was really nice. I liked it. The COVID is something really unique. We cannot really factor COVID in every decision that we make because it's something that happened, a pandemic doesn't happen every, I don't have the data. You're probably more qualified than me in the medical field, knowing probably the history of pandemics that spread this much. But this, as big as COVID, I don't think they happen this much where the economy crashes and everything stops. Economy can do well and bad in times, so that can happen, but for everything to stop, that's a risk. But again, when people tell you have to get a degree before or do a degree during or after or whatever, it's really nice to be educated, to have extra degrees and to be knowledgeable in other fields. But trust me that once you start in a field like aviation and let's say you work for 5 years and you want to back up yourself with a degree, it could be useful. But you will find other people that are fresh from the university. I don't think that someone that would hire someone without experience that has a degree that has not expired, that's 5 years old, where someone that's fresh from university and probably, that's how I see it. Because I've seen people with engineering degrees and during COVID, they didn't find a job in that field. So it was irrelevant. It's not a rule that applies to everyone. You could be different from people. You could find a job overnight in a different field with or without a degree.
That's right, yeah. I think, to be honest, if you want to get any job in any field, that there are so many different ways of going into that field and get it. And degree is not always the answer. So there are lots of different routes of sort of breaking into an industry and securing your first job. And aviation is exactly the same, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, sorry, I stopped you for a second, but the second question, what influenced me to become an airline pilot, right? Well, yeah, I'm not sure even myself what exactly influenced me to become an airline pilot, but there's something that I would say I'm quite sure about is I used to play a lot of Flight Simulator when I was a kid. I used to spend hours and hours on that just because I was fascinated by planes. I would say that what influenced me or pushed me to be exposed more to airplanes. And also my father used to work in the aviation industry, so that's an extra exposure to the aviation field. For example, when we used to travel, I would fly in the flight deck, I would speak to the pilots, and they will show me things in the flight deck. So all these things, when you see them, you say, oh, maybe one day I want to be there and, fly those planes and experience what they were experiencing. I think the reason that pushed me to really pursue this career is, in my mind, I didn't know what I would do if I didn't become a pilot. That was that or nothing else. There are other fields that interest me, but nothing that was as exciting as becoming a pilot.
Passion is always very important, isn't it? If you're passionate for something, work doesn't seem like work, as they often say. So passion is very important. So I think my next question is linked to this question, which is people become pilots these days or want to become pilots for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's because the profession provides an opportunity to travel all around the world. You can have an opportunity to meet new people from all around the world. And some people simply just want to become pilot because of the money. So I was going to ask you, what is that like as a motivation if someone wants to do something for the money? If it's that main reason, is that bad, or does that have any kind of influence on their ability to become a pilot or the quality of a pilot that they become more in terms of competency? So if money is a motivating factor, what would you say about that for someone? This is not necessarily for me, I'm just saying.
But it's a good question.
Pursuing money is not a bad thing. I mean, we're all, at the end of the day, we all want money. There is passion and everything, but if you want to build a family, you want to build a house, you want to buy that nice car, and you want to have a nice vacation. So it all ends up or narrows down to money, the paycheck at the end of the month. But if that's your, I would say, main motivator to pursue your pilot career, again, nothing wrong with that. Just because some people are smart. They can do things even if they're not passionate about it, because that's their end goal and they work for their end goal, which is the money. Then they will put the hard work that keeps them away or that separates them from their end goal, which is just the hard work of becoming a pilot and then getting that big paycheck, let's say at the end of the month. Just you have to take into consideration that with time, the money might not interest you anymore because you just go to a job, not to, as you said earlier, you put it very nicely, when you're passionate, you don't go to work. Because as I told you, I think my message is when you're a pilot, depending again on the airline, depending on many factors, which airplane you fly and which country, which continent, etc., the many variables that will decide how is your life as a pilot. But you have to consider that you will be missing a lot of birthdays, for example. You'll be missing family gatherings, things like this. I'm not saying necessarily they happen, because when an airline is well structured, then they have a good bidding system, they have a good annual leave system where you will be able to allocate your leave, your days off, etc., not to miss those big events. But you might find yourself in a position or in an airline or a company where you have to just give up on these things because you don't have enough. And if money is your big motivator, then it's fine. But my honest opinion, I would say, or what I would have, or what I would recommend for people or advise them, is not to do it for the money. Because what people see nowadays is Instagram and YouTube, and they see all these people flying big jets and wearing these fancy uniforms and traveling to these nice destinations. But in reality, not everyone starts there. When the market is doing well, you start on those nice airlines or big planes, whatever. But when the market is doing bad, whatever your chances or which license you have, or let's say you couldn't finish your flight training because you didn't have enough money to finish it. So you have, for example, a CPL, and you don't have your MCC or whatever that's left off to start with an airline, then you would probably be flying a Cessna Caravan and doing bush flying. So it's not going to be as fancy. So that has to be factored in the decision making, because you could find yourself in that position. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry?
I don't know what are your thoughts on what I just said, or what are your perspectives?
I completely agree. So after sort of speaking with different pilots as well, they all mentioned the same thing, that when you start your career, it's not always going to be very lucrative. You're not going to be, getting paid very high as you may expect, to be honest, which you may well earn towards the latter part of your career, but it's not going to start that way, and you will have to learn your trade. You will have to start at the bottom and then work your way up in the seniority list, and then hopefully things will get better with time and with experience. So of course, you have to go through that phase. You have to start at the bottom with the low-cost carriers, for example, and then build your way up to a regional level, and then maybe a major airline. So that progression is natural, right? So yeah, I completely agree, and I think you have to these days have more than money to drive you to do that, because as you said, it's not always going to be fancy and lucrative, and you will have to deal with a lot of challenges as well. If money is your only motivating factor, you may struggle, because you will have to deal with irregular work patterns. You'll be missing family gatherings, family events. So I think if you have a number of those factors that are good reasons to become pilots, then it becomes a really good proposal. But money alone, I think it's not enough. Which leads me nicely onto the next question, actually. So I wanted to discuss some of the good and bad things about becoming an airline pilot. I think it's very important that the people or your audience understand what are the challenges of becoming an airline pilot. What are some of the good things? So I think somebody like yourself, who is currently working as an airline pilot, is best placed to explain what are the good and the bad things about being an airline pilot.
Which one should we start with, the bad or the good?
Let's start with the good. What are some of the good things of becoming an airline?
Yeah, so all the good things, man, there are many good things. But again, it's the same as the previous question. It's very, I would say, depending on where you found yourself as an airline pilot. If you find yourself working as a bush pilot, then this will be different as if you work for a major airline somewhere in Europe or whatever in the continent, on Earth. But the good things are travel. As you said it earlier, travel is one of the big things, especially if you fly long haul. Then you travel to you can be taken off from an airport where it's 30 degrees Celsius and you go to minus whatever. And you go from a place where it's snowing to a place where you can just wear shorts and go swimming. These are all nice things that you can do. And people, they put them very well on Instagram, by the way. It's that's not a lie. It is what it is. So the travel, I would say, flying with different people from different cultures, different experiences, man, wealth of knowledge. Some people that just they're very open to share their knowledge, and that's one of the amazing things. But again, depending on where you find which airline, because some airlines, you will find yourself based, for example, in a city where you'll be flying with the same people every day. So that could be a bad thing. We will list it in the end. But one of the good things as well of being an airline pilot is that you meet different people. The crew, the pilots, every day is different. The weather that you might have today will not be the same that you're going to have the next day. The passengers are different. For every destination, you have different passengers and you see different cultures. All these things, they change. But from a pilot perspective, I would say travel, money. When you fly long haul is the amount of days off that you get. That's something that's, in my opinion, I appreciate so much, because I get so much time to spend with my family. If I need to travel, I don't even need to use my leave sometimes. I would just travel on those days off. One of the best things that you can experience as a pilot is the shifts. You, as a medical professional, then you know that you can get different shifts. For example, sometimes you can work early mornings, late evenings. Different shifts you can be doing 3 earlies and then 3 late starts. Jet lag, again, sometimes if you're very well organized, then jet lag should not be a big problem, because you would organize yourself in such a way that you get the right amount of rest in your layovers, after your layovers, etc. Other things would be, as we said, you miss big events.
Sometimes what I've had pilots say is that they are often, because they are traveling all the time for work, that they're always in different time zones, different climates, different countries. So sometimes they can lose track of what the time is, where they are, or what they're doing. So sometimes they can not know where they are, not be present in the moment, because they're traveling in, as I said, new time zones and new places, and sort of, can that become a factor as well if you're involved in such intense rota of traveling? Is that maybe
that's very excessive, because that's very excessive not to know where you are. And I get it. Sometimes, when you change hotels so much, you wake up in the morning and you say, like, for a split second, you don't know where you are. That happens to every person that travels a lot, which is very normal. Again, if you are very disciplined, organized, you have a healthy lifestyle, you exercise, then it should be fine. I don't think that should intervene with your health in general or your emotional well-being as a person. But anything in excess is bad, and there are many things that could probably fit you, and other things that would fit that don't fit you could fit someone else better. If you're flying for, let's say, a low cost in Europe, you'll be doing a lot of sectors a day, and that's a lot of work. I've done it before, doing 4 sectors a day. It's doable, but it's exhausting, I would say, because you spend, especially 4 sectors, they are very short, and you spend so much time in the critical phases of the flight. And those critical phases of flight, you are so concentrated that you consume a lot of energy, body energy, thinking energy, everything. So you might just find yourself drained after those flights. I get it. Maybe you should try something different. There are many airlines that propose different type of rosters. But again, very subjective. Some people sustain that lifestyle very well. I've done it for a few years and it was okay. But I can understand some people to feel exhausted after flying those amount of sectors.
Yeah. Okay, let's discuss another potential disadvantage of becoming an airline pilot, which is night flying. So I'm guessing no pilot looks forward to night flying, particularly if it's starting 3-4 a.m. in the morning. From what I've heard, and in some airlines, night flying is more prevalent than, for example, in some of the other airlines. So can you explain what a night flying entails, or is that really challenging? And can some airlines have more night flying than others?
Again, most airlines that are aware of fatigue and they factor it into the roster of a pilot, then they will be aware that they cannot give you this many flights at night or early mornings, because there is something, I'm sure you've heard of it, you're in the medical field, circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So if someone is scheduled within that circadian rhythm, within that window, then there are some restrictions on how many times you can have it on your roster. Many airlines, they operate early mornings, late evenings, and all that. They will give you enough time to rest before and after the flight. So you'll have, again, to be disciplined, organized to have enough rest before the flight, and also do other things during the flight. Like some people, they like to drink coffee. For now, what works fine is being organized, honestly, and having a good roster. Again, you can bid, you can swap. If you see that it's going to be hard on you, there are many things that you can do. But airlines are aware of this, and they don't, like, for example, from a passenger perspective, they would see that, or they would think that an airline is scheduling the same pilots every day for the same flights. But actually, they are not. They will give you a early start. They will give you enough time for you to rest for the subsequent flight. And you shouldn't, again, very subjective, feel very tired for the next pattern. Again, this is at my stage now as a pilot. You might ask me in 10 years, I would have a different opinion on it. But for now, it is like this. And yeah.
Okay. No, that's really good to know. And another common one is how people always mention that pilots are always away from home, so that can affect their personal life, their sort of family life, especially if they're married and they have kids. So we touched upon this slightly before when we mentioned that you will be away for most weekends, you'll be away for most family events and so on. But more on a general day-to-day level, so how often would you say pilots can be away from home so that they're not present at home? But I've also spoken to a few of other pilots who have mentioned that this usually is not a problem, because if you think about a regular Monday to Friday 9 to 5 person, they will often have 8 days where they are off from work, so the 2 weekends in the month. And as a pilot, you can be off 12 to 15 days, again, depending on the airline. So you're actually spending more time at home. So this is often not a problem for some. But what would you say, being a pilot, being away from home, is that a potential disadvantage of the job where it can affect your personal life, your family life, if you're married and you have kids?
Let's take an airline, for example. We'll start with examples. If you take one in Europe, you will find airlines where they give you 4 days on, 4 days off. So you might know your roster 5 years ahead because it's fixed. It's like that. So you can organize your life exactly the way you want it. Other airlines, you will find yourself where the weekend or the 2 days off you will have, they're in the middle of the week. Some people take it as an advantage. Some people say it's a disadvantage. Some people think that when you have it in the middle of the week, it's nice because when you go groceries or you take your family out, things are not crowded as if you go out in the weekend. So people prefer that. Some people prefer the weekend because they have kids and they want to spend time with their kids because the whole week they're at school. When you fly as a long-haul pilot, again, it's different because your flight might be in the middle of the weekend and you might be away for, let's say, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. It doesn't happen that much to be away for this long, but the amount of days off that you get afterwards are more than enough. For example, when you fly long haul, you cannot fly more than, let's say, 5 flights a month. You can, but if you're doing only long haul, you will find yourself at the end of the month with 90 hours already. So if you're flying 5 flights a month, and each one you're away for, call it 4 days if you want, that's a lot, which gives you 10 days. But most of the time you're away for 3 days. So half of the month you're not away. So I am personally okay of being away during the weekends for 15 days, but I'm home for 15 days.
So it's not as bad as it may seem. So pilots can be away from home, but they're not away maybe 20 days of the month or even longer. So it's, even though it may seem like in your calendar you're working, you may not be away for that long.
Yeah. And some pilots, for example, in my previous airline, I used to come back home every day. I would do my sectors and I will come back every day at home. So that's not even a problem. You're back where you started, and if you have a chance, then you'll get the weekends as well.
And as far as changing direction a little bit, so you can, as you know, so you will have to get a medical every year. And I think after the age of 40, it becomes every 6 months that you have to get a class 1 medical to become to retain as a pilot. Okay. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Please, everyone who's looking at or watching this video, all the information I'm giving, you have to go back it up and make sure that you're getting the most updated information, because I'm not a medical doctor or an aeromedical examiner. So all the information, better check it with the Civil Aviation Authority where you're doing your license. That's where you should get information, not from a pilot. You can ask a pilot for these questions, but make sure to back them up with the most updated one. The 6-month medical, as far as I know, it used to be like that, but it's not anymore. I think, again, I am not sure, but to the best of my knowledge, I would answer it like this. If you're flying multi-pilot aircraft, then you don't need to do it every 6 months. Only after 60, you start doing it after 6 months, when you're 60. If you're flying single pilot operation, then I suspect then a pilot needs to do it every 6 months starting from 40. But as a general rule, it's every year until your 60th birthday, and then it becomes every 6 months.
And if you've been inflicted with a long-term illness, for example, or long-term sickness, then in what situations would you lose your license, or would you be given the chance to go and seek long-term treatment and then potentially come back to your normal duties? So can you help us understand where would an individual due to long-term illness lose their license as opposed to coming back to work after seeking treatment? Because I think there are some illnesses which will not allow you to come back from, and you will lose your license, but I didn't understand it in detail.
Yeah, so you, for those who are not familiar, a pilot has a medical license that goes with his license, and the medical license needs to be renewed every year. So without that medical license, you cannot exercise the privileges of your license as a pilot, and hence the question of Abdullah, which is really nice. If you lose that medical license, then you cannot be a pilot anymore. So a license gets suspended after 21 days of continuous illness. If to recover it, you would need to go to a medical examiner, again, our medical examiner, where he would need to reassess your medical fitness before they can reissue the license. Again, please go check the information where you're doing your license. That's the most updated and correct information. A pilot can lose his license for many reasons, and I cannot really list or name a specific condition that will revoke your license, but there are many things that you can think of from the top of your head that can revoke your license. again, depending on the condition and what happens afterwards, how you recover, etc., then when that's clear, then you will have to do, again, a medical exam. They could ask you for an initial assessment. Well, they will start everything from the start, which is the initial assessment is a bigger or a more thorough medical exam so that they can release you again to flying. They might release you only for, I don't know, medical license. They might give you initially for 6 months, something like that. There is medical license insurance. So that you can take if you want to. You could cover yourself with that. The conditions that might make you lose your medical license, there are many things. You could just break your hand and not fly for, I don't know, 21 days, then you cannot fly anymore because you have to go to our medical examiner where we need to reassess that your hand is fine and you can do the things that you need to do in flight. Like, for example, if you break your leg, then the same thing. They will need to check if your leg has gotten better, and they will do probably some exercises, see if you can push with the rudder, replicate the movement that you do on the airplane. And from there, they will reassess you and say if you're fit or not, or what you need extra to give you back your medical license. But really, to name the conditions, there are many conditions. And, in the medical field, there are many things that can happen to a human being. Unfortunately, we are like that. That's something that we have to take into account. But what was the second question again regarding the medical license?
Yeah, I think you've answered the question.
Okay.
The question basically was, in which situations would you lose your license versus where you would be given the chance to come back and resume your normal working duties. So I think you've answered the question. Thank you. Now, one of the key questions I asked you before, and I wanted to ask you was, so these days, as you know, air travel is very, very safe. All airlines, even the manufacturers of these aircrafts, they have SOPs for everything. And pilots have to follow these SOPs vigorously because they're very, very important. And there's often, with the advancement in technology, there's also a backup system, I believe, for every single thing as well. However, emergencies can happen. And as somebody who has a particular interest in watching videos on incidents and accidents, I often find that they happen due to a number of reasons. Sometimes it can just be simply where pilots don't follow these SOPs and an accident can happen as a result of that. However, they can also happen due to factors that are outside of your control. For example, adverse weather, or maybe birds, for example, like a bird strike that can happen, or something like that. So I wanted to basically ask you, what are their perspectives on emergencies? Because they can happen, although they're very infrequent if you consider how safe air travel is these days. But I sometimes am concerned with the thought, what if I'm sitting in a cockpit and an emergency happens, for example, an engine failure, or how do pilots deal with these thoughts? Do these thoughts run through your mind as an airline pilot, or what's your perspective on this, if you can shed some light?
This question is very, very nice. I like it. Of course, as a pilot, you think about these emergencies. If you're not thinking about the emergencies, then probably you should not be sitting there, because as a pilot, your job is not only to fly, but to anticipate what can happen next. Thinking about the emergencies is really something that comes as an extra effort that you do as a pilot, because you enter a routine when you fly. You know exactly, if you operate the same route, it happened to me before, if you operate the same route from this destination to that destination, and you've done it a myriad times, and you know like exactly each frequency for each ATC, you know what the air traffic controller is going to tell you, what's the next frequency, because you've heard it so many times that you have to, you know it. You prepare the frequencies beforehand because you know which frequency is coming. So just to tell you that there is a certain routine that the pilot enters. But as a pilot, and I've seen a lot of pilots do that, is, as you said, be very disciplined with SOPs. Even if you know the information, and this I do it personally, other people can copy it if they want to do it, and I really recommend it, is even if you know the information, you know that you know how to do it, always go and look for the information. For example, you're familiar with the approach chart that we use for when we fly? You know what I'm talking about? So there is some information that you find on the charts, for example, the approach minima, the go around altitudes, etc. So these information, for example, if you fly to the same airport, you know them by heart. But if you don't look on the chart on the day where they change for any reason, you have a temporary chart because there's some construction, whatever, then you might miss the information because you're not disciplined. And again, accidents happen not because of one problem, but because of many. So you break many barriers. On that day, you say, I know that information very well. I'm not going to look for it because I know it by heart. So you got to put the wrong information. You might bust the minimums because you put the minimums lower, which now they are higher. And for any reason, that could lead to a subsequent thing. That could lead to something else. And those, I would say, pilot errors happen. And that's where the accidents happen. A pilot has to be really disciplined and to be aware that potentially something can happen. I would say all the time. You have to be aware of it and you have to be humble about it. Again, something that I'm really grateful to see when I fly with pilots is even you see pilots that are type rating instructors, examiners, they are close to 60 years. They have 20, 30,000 flying hours and they still go to the flight telling you, if there is anything that you think that I'm not doing right, please tell me. Because if you go to a flight thinking that you know everything, then maybe you should stop flying because probably you're becoming a bit dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's something you have to take every time you go to a flight. Maybe it's a burden for some, but it has to be like that. You're carrying passengers, you're carrying lives. But trust me, it's not that much of a weight on you once you know what you're doing. But you have to be aware that you have to spot threats all the time. There are phases where you cool down, of course, but we know there are critical phases of each flight, which are the takeoff and the landing, when you're operating in congested areas, all these things, you have to be aware of them. Being aware of accidents and how we deal with the emergencies, we have trainings and exams every 6 months because the best thing is to share experience. I have learned from the experience of others. And that's our industry, unfortunately. We learn from the mistakes of others. Not only that, when we see things happen, we project and we see, or now what the industry has shifted to is a threat-based, or I would say most briefings as a pilot, are now threat-based briefings because we anticipate threats before they happen and we try to mitigate them by talking about how we will deal with them if they happen. Again, when you do the 6-month training, you go through the failures, and you would have a certain method on how to deal with the emergencies when they happen, how to manage the failure, etc. But to be honest with you, most of them are, I would say, easy to handle if you have a method on how to do them, because there is a human factor that's involved in an airplane, which makes things complicated. Some people would get anxious when there is a problem. Some people will, I don't know, it's human nature. So the first thing when there's an emergency is not to do anything. So the first I'm saying when something happens in those split seconds is not to do anything, because most people, they jump into doing things and then they start making things worse. So there are many things that we can talk about as a pilot, what you can do to make emergencies, or what are the things that run into your head in case an emergency happen. But there are many things that you learn through the years where you can anticipate things. When you're flying, you say, this happens, what do I do? Or if an engine fails now, what are my actions? If I have a 4-engine airplane, then if one engine fails, it's not a big problem because you have still 3 engines, you can continue to destination sometimes. But if you have 2 engines and you are in the middle of the ocean, then you start thinking about diverting because that engine can only sustain an amount of hours at that power setting. So there are many things that you have to think about as a pilot when it comes into emergencies. But again, the question that you asked is very subjective, how to deal with it from a human perspective with all the stress that comes with it. That comes with experience on how to absorb things when they happen. Everyone has a startle effect, that fight or flight system, which is really good. Again, it can work for you. If you make it work for you, not against you, then it could be a good thing.
No, thank you very much for that perspective. It's very important because obviously as pilots, they're just human beings like anyone else. And when they're in the cockpit, when an emergency happens, it's natural they will also go through emotions that anyone will, for example. And it's about handling those emotions and making sure that you're carefully managing those situations and having a presence of mind, to be able to troubleshoot the problem and deal with it as in the best way possible, for example. So I think that's the most important thing, isn't it? And I think the most important thing to understand is that these days air travel is very safe and there are SOPs for everything. So in order to prevent emergencies from happening, and then when they do, how do you deal with them. So I think that helps with that process.
Perfect. Of course, it does help, and you will see when you become a pilot, you will have your method as well, your a model that you will use to troubleshoot a failure on, and how to contain yourself when something happens. The good thing about talking about this is you will start to recognize it. If you don't recognize that you're under stress, then that's where the problem is, because you have to be aware of your emotions to be able to change them. If you're not aware of them, then you will start jumping and doing things when you're not supposed to do it. You will see when you start as a pilot, and everyone can relate to this, you want to show the other guy that you can do things really fast. You want to show them that you know things, that you are fresh, you know the books by heart. But when you look at the other guy, which is, I don't know, old guy, close to retirement, whatever, you say, this guy is very slow. But as you gain experience, you become like that guy. You don't have to be old, but you realize that you have to do things slow. When you things start going fast, it's time to slow them down. Nothing has to be fast, and you're not there to show off to anyone that you have to do things really fast. And just, yeah, that's really something you will see. You will do exactly the same, which is normal, but being aware of it, probably you're going to avoid it. But in aviation, things has to be slow. There is time pressure, there is on-time performance pressure, which is normal. You have to take passengers from one point to another, but there is nothing that supersedes safety. And that's the way it is.
And just very finally, I have two questions relating to the route to become a pilot. So one of the questions I was going to ask you was, as you know, after you complete your pilot training, you have to do a type rating course. Yeah. So is generally type rating covered by the airlines, or is that also something that the individual has to get type rating? I'm sure it's different in different parts of the world, but generally speaking, is there a ruling on who should cover for type rating, or who covers for the type rating? Is it the individual or the company, if you can?
No, there is no rule or agreement between pilots or flight schools, and there are actually with flight schools and airlines. But when you do your training by yourself, then you finish only with the license, which is an multi-engine IR with a frozen ATPL, and an MCC, which is a certificate. The type rating will depend on where you're applying. If you apply to an airline that sponsors the training, they might do the type rating, and then they will deduct that amount, or from that whole amount, from your salary every month until you finish paying it off. Other schools, they will prepare you for that specific airlines, and you will have to pay for that whole amount from the start till the finish, including type rating. And they will do your flight training, your type rating, and then you'll be ready to do your line training with the airline once you finish. I would say what's commonly used is a type rating will be paid by the individual after you finish your flight training.
And how do you choose which type to go on? So you can obviously go on the Boeing, or you can go on the Airbus, and different aircrafts as well within each. Yeah. So how do you choose which one to get a type rating on? So for example, for an individual who's just completed flight training, they've got the multi-engine instrument rating, and they've got the CPL, and now it's time to start applying for jobs. So how do you decide which type rating to get?
So most airlines are aware that pilots, when they finish, they don't have the type rating. They know that pilots that will apply, they don't have a type rating. And most airlines now prefer for them to do the type rating for the pilots, so that they know their SOPs from the start. Most pilots, when they finish nowadays, they don't do the type rating unless they have found a job. Because most of us, when we finish our flight training, we have a huge loan waiting for us. We don't want to pay an extra, I don't know how much, X amount on top of that, and then find yourself without the job. So the first thing that we do is secure a job, make sure that there's a job that's waiting for you, or you have passed your interviews, then you will do the type rating. And most of those type ratings are with the airline that has hired you. Some other airlines will ask you to do it on yourself, or by yourself, or with a agreed training organization, and then they will take you with that type rating. But what's commonly practiced now, I would say, in Europe, is you do it with the airline. You finish your flight training, and then you do it with the airline on that specific type rating. Otherwise, you could be getting a Boeing type rating, and then you find a job on an Airbus. So you will not be using that type rating.
Will you be at a disadvantage when you go for a job without a type rating? Because I know some of the airlines do ask for type rated pilots. So if you're applying for a job without a type rating, will you be at a disadvantage, would you say?
When you apply for an airline, you go on the website, you check the criteria that they need, and you would need to tick all the boxes. If one of the boxes is to have a type rating, then you don't even qualify to apply. If the airline does require type rating, then you are in the same level as all the other candidates. So the thing that will make you differentiate yourself from the others is not really the type rating. It depends on the individual. Some people, they prefer to do type rating. They can do it to increase their chances. But if the airline doesn't ask for it, then you don't really need to do it.
Yeah. And as you know, for somebody coming fresh out of flight school, it's getting a first job is a big deal, because that is where your career starts as an airline pilot, and some candidates can struggle to get a first job. These days it can be a little bit easier due to the pilot shortage, but previously it has been difficult to get that first job. So can you advise of some of the reasons that can help set you apart from the other candidates who are going for these jobs? What are some of the things you can be doing to boost your profile, your CV, and enhance your chances of getting that first job?
Of course, as you said, it starts with the CV. Your CV has to be presentable. You have to put the relevant information where they need to be. We don't need even to talk about the CV. The second thing would be is to have your license up to date. Some people, unfortunately, they apply with their licenses not valid, because they think that they have the license. As soon as they get the call, then they will go renew their license, because they say it's useless for me to have it valid, pay that money when I'm not using it. You have to show that you're motivated from the start, and that starts with those small things. When you go to the interview itself, it starts with, what can I do different from the others? Because everyone will be saying the same things, and all the interviewers will be hearing the same thing every day. They'll be saying, hi, my name is that, I've done this, I've done that, I'm better than the other candidates. But what can I say that will differentiate me from the others? Something that guy will remember me more than the others. And that will come to things that you will have to find as words, things that you have to say, how to express yourself. And the things that I have used in the past is film myself. I would film myself on how I would talk. If I'm using too much hand gestures and I'm using too many filler words, things like this, I would try to work on that, so that those will be things that I would start with. The second thing is use words and sentences that will trigger the person. What I like to do, for example, when I start an interview, then you start with words like, for example, let me tell you a story, or I want to put a backstory to this. See, you grasp their attention by saying, like, I want to tell you a story. It's different from the others. You got the gist of it. You can use these trigger words that will differentiate you from them, because you grasp their attention and they remember Abdullah, that guy, not who's Abdullah.
Yeah. No, that's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that advice, and it was really beneficial for me, and I'm sure it has been for some of the viewers as well. So thank you so much for that. And just one final question is that with regards to licensing, there are different licenses that are issued by different licensing bodies. So in Europe, the common one is the EASA license, which is issued by EASA, and then post-Brexit in the UK we have another license, which is the UK. Which is issued by the UK Civil Aviation Authority. Is the UK license recognized in the Middle East, in Dubai and other places or do you have a separate licensing body that has to that issues its own license? Are these licenses recognized by the Middle Eastern authority as well?
Most licenses are recognized in the Middle East. All you would need to do is a conversion to your license. Conversion will depend on which country. Some countries will ask you to do an airlaw exam. Some others will ask you to do an airlaw exam and maybe some other exams, maybe simulator exam. If you're applying for an airline, then you come here with the experience, and it should be just some sort of airlaw exam, and that's it. If you come without experience and you're not going directly for a type rating, the regulation might change. If you just want to have a Middle Eastern license, then they might ask you to fly probably on an airplane to the certain amount of hours with the examiner, etc.
Okay, cool. I think that brings me to the end of my questions. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you immensely for your opportunity to answer those questions. It's been a very beneficial session for me. So thank you so much.
My last question before you leave is, what path do you want to follow when you decide to become an airline pilot? What's the thing that you think is most suitable for you?
At the moment, I'm currently employed full-time, and I'm thinking about how I could potentially go down this route, and what would be the best way for me to pursue this career and do flight training. Obviously, flight training comes with lots of challenges. As you said, it requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of study, and there's also money as well. Barrier to entry is very, very high, and a lot of the time, the reason which holds a lot of candidates back from achieving their dreams of becoming an airline pilot is the money factor. Correct. So a lot of these factors have to be managed together in order for the successful outcome, if you like. So I'm thinking, I'm thinking of pursuing the modular route of flight training, where I can continue to work in my current job as well as do, flight training in my spare time. So I'm thinking of going down this route where I will need to obtain a Class 1 medical and then PPL, and then after that, all the other modules as well, flight, hour building and ATPLs, and then multi-engine instrument and CPL, etc. So I'm thinking of pursuing the modular route to complete my flight training. I'm slightly in double minds whether to do a dual license, so EASA and a UK, or whether I should just do the UK. This is a common debate in the UK because post-Brexit, only the UK license is the one that is recognized by the UK carriers, and then EASA is the European one. However, to enhance your opportunities of employability, some candidates do get the dual license, but that requires you to do a second set of ATPLs again, so that includes 28 exams, which requires a lot of time and effort, if you like, especially if you're doing a full-time job. So I'm slightly unsure about that, but in any case, I would like to get the UK license as a minimum, and then get a job here in the UK. So this is the plan so far.
That sounds really nice. I like to see people that are very motivated and they've done the research, and it looks like you've done your research and you know what you're following. It's not like you're gonna stop a career and then just throw yourself in something that you're not sure what's gonna be like and from where you're gonna start and where you're gonna end. It looks like it's already drawn in your head and you know exactly what you're gonna follow. And honestly, the way you talk and how you express yourself, you should not have a problem. Again, you don't assess a pilot on one thing, on many things, and I have no doubt that you will excel in that if you put your mind into it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your kind words. And once again, thank you very much for your time. We've been going for just over an hour now, and it's been a very, very informative, very insightful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your nice questions. I'm sure they will help a lot of people watching this, and a lot of people are wanting to switch careers, and they can't really take that leap of faith or take that jump, which is really hard. I really understand, and some have done it, and it paid off. And some spend so much time thinking about it and they never do it. But I encourage everyone to do their proper research and to go for it if that's the thing they want to follow. Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best. If you have any question, please, it's anytime you just send me a message. I'll be happy to come up with the best answer
Absolutely, will do. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much once again.
I'll catch you in a bit.
Catch you in a bit.
Yeah, see you, Abdullah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.